Hey guys, this is Jason from MainstreamGeek.com, and you're listening to the Mainstream Geek Podcast for February 3rd, 2016. Before we get started today, I just want to remind everybody to go to MainstreamGeek.com. That's where you can find all of my social links, and that's the best way to get in touch with me. Also, make sure you're going to iTunes or whatever podcatcher you're using, and rating, reviewing, and subscribing to the show. Also, visit CompletelyStraight.com. That's where you can find my other podcast. It comes out on Mondays and Thursdays. And with that, let's get into some news stories. What all we have going on here? The SpiderMan reboot's going to be in IMAX 3D. I really don't see how this is a story. Saying an action movie, let alone a superhero movie, in the year 2017 is going to be in IMAX 3D is like marketing an album from a band and saying it's going to be played through speakers. Pretty much any movie that's going to be a spectacle of any sort in this day and age is going to be in IMAX 3D. If for nothing else, it's a way to squeeze twice the ticket price out of anyone who's willing to go to that showing and pad the box office a little bit. You're not going to have a movie where the main character is swinging through tall buildings and not have it in 3D. I can't remember for sure, but I think Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man movies were both in 3D, weren't they? I can almost swear I went and saw the first one in 3D, but I'm not sure about that. I'll have to check on that. If you guys know, find me on Twitter at Mainstream Geek and let me know. So I'm lost as to why this is a story, actually. I guess because by announcing it, it gets people like me to talk about the fact that the movie exists and lets the public know that there's a new incarnation of Spider-Man coming. So bravo to them because they were right. It's a news story and people like me like to talk about news stories like this. So good job on them. What is surprising about this is that they aren't filming in 3D. Or IMAX. They're going to film like a regular movie, but enhance it to make it IMAX and to make it 3D, which never comes off well. They always come out looking bad. It's always a little blurry, but it's not so blurry to where you can't tell what's going on, but it's just this little blur that kind of distracts you from what's going on when they do that. 3D movies really need to be shot in 3D. If you're going to make that investment, why not just go the little bit further with the budget and do the real 3D shoot? The fact that they aren't investing the money to film an actual 3D doesn't make me optimistic, though. They already have a bit of a weird team writing and directing this movie. The director, John Watts, I actually have a lot of faith in him because he directed one of the most original movies of last year, Cop Car, starring Kevin Bacon. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's a really interesting and dark take on the two kids on an adventure movie. So if you've got some time, check it out. But the writers are John Francis Daley, who you might remember as the little kid Sam from Freaks and Geeks, and his writing partner Jonathan M. Goldstein. A lot of Johns in the making of this movie. But the two of them are responsible for writing movies like Cloudy with Meatballs Part 2, which I never saw, Horrible Bosses 2, which I love the original Horrible Bosses, but the second one, it really fell flat. And then they did the 2015 remake of Vacation, which, you know, it's not as funny as Vacation or Christmas Vacation. And it got a lot of flack from critics, but I have to say, it's not the worst vacation movie ever made. There are actually a lot of parts where I laughed out loud during that movie, and I didn't find myself not liking it at all during the movie. I mean, it wasn't good, but it wasn't bad either. It was just a movie, you know, and most movies are just that. They're just movies. So this movie was just a fine movie. So I don't know why critics gave it such a hard time. It's just kind of weird that the writers who are responsible for a failed sequel to a kids movie, a failed sequel to an adult comedy, and a reboot are going to be responsible for starting the reboot that is responsible for a series of sequels of films. I wonder why they went that route. Also, they aren't that great at writing comedy. Like I said, Horrible Bosses 2 was fine, but it didn't have the same kind of laughs that the first one did. And if I'm not mistaken, the new Spider-Man movie is going to kind of be like a teen comedy, because you know how Marvel likes to do genre-type films with each of their properties, like Captain America, Winter Soldier was a spy thriller. Ant-Man was a heist movie. So it's kind of strange that they're choosing two guys who not only don't have a good track record, but they aren't as funny as some of the other writers after to write a teen comedy type of movie. Speaking of Spider-Man, he's supposed to make his debut in Captain America Civil War, which is set to come out in 3 months, and we have yet, at the time of this recording, to see hide nor hair of what his new look is going to be. I know that they're keeping it secret to build up anticipation, but the closest thing we've gotten as yet is some leaked t-shirts that are supposed to be modeled after the new look of the costume, and those aren't looking so good. There's a piece of fan art that was designed around the description of what Kevin Feige wanted the costume to look like when they first melded Marvel and Sony together. It was supposed to look very homemade, according to Kevin Feige. And the fan art kind of made a Spider-Man costume that resembled the Spider-Gwen costume from the newer comics, where it's like a hoodie with a spider design on it. And I thought that looked kind of cool for a starter costume to introduce the kid. But it was just fan art. It is curious that we haven't seen anything on his look, though. Apparently, people have seen the movie. Not just studio execs, test audiences have seen the movie. I have a story on that here somewhere. Hold on. Yeah, apparently Civil War has been seen by test audiences, and it's testing through the roof. The best tested Marvel movie up to this point was Captain America Civil War, which happens to be in a three-way tie with Iron Man 1 and Guardians of the Galaxy for my favorite Marvel film up to this point. Winter Soldier was directed by the Russo brothers, just like Civil War is going to be, which gives me a lot of hope for the Infinity War movies, because they're taking the director's chair for those movies as well. But Civil War is apparently testing better than Winter Soldier did. So somewhere out there, there is a group of people who have seen the movie, so they know what the deal with Spider-Man is in Civil War. I doubt info from that will leak, because I'm sure Marvel has some pretty heavy-duty NDAs that will probably have writing in there that say you have to give your firstborn child up if you leak anything. But the internet is a place where things can be done anonymously, so I'm sure that if there's anything to do with Spider-Man's new look in the movie, the fact that they're showing the movie to test audiences kind of indicates that they're close to showing it. But that's only if the Spider-Man costume is even in the movie. They could just be introducing the new Peter Parker in Civil War, which might actually be preferable in a movie that is so top-loaded with old characters and new characters. I'd be fine with Spider-Man's role in Civil War being simply, hello, here's Peter Parker. There wasn't room for him in this movie to be Spider-Man, but he does now exist in this universe. That's it. That'd be perfect. Give us a little taste, a little appetizer for the 2017 Spider-Man movie, and leave it at that. How packed the Civil War movie is actually kind of concerns me. A lot like how packed the Batman v Superman movie is concerns me. I feel like starting with Age of Ultron, Marvel started using movies as kind of like 2-hour-long coming soon trailers. I mean, seriously, think about it. Think back to Age of Ultron. It wasn't a bad movie, but it was nowhere near as good as the original Avengers movie. Pretty much every major plot point in the movie was almost like the studio saying, see this? It means something, and you'll find out what it is in 3 movies, so make sure you see them all. Now, all the plot points in the movie did make sense, and they did end up telling a cohesive story, except for maybe Thor's Vision Quest where he went in that cave. That was really out of place, but I think that was because there was a lot of stuff cut from it. But still, it was out of place, and it really came across as a way of saying, look what's coming down the line. But even though it all made sense as a story, what bothered me was more that the movie itself seemed more concerned with telling you stuff was coming instead of living in that movie itself and making sure that they were telling the best story that they could tell in that movie. I would really just hate for that to be the case in Civil War, because Civil War, in the comics, it was an awesome story. And I know they can't do Civil War exactly like they did in the comic books because there are no secret identities in the MCU, and because of rights issues with other characters, and because other plot points can't be introduced because characters are owned by other studios, and blah, 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 blah. I know all that. I don't even really want them to follow the plot line to a T because I want to be surprised when I see the movie. That's not what the problem is. I just don't want them to take Civil War and make it a Black Panther preview, or a Infinity War preview, or a Guardians of the Galaxy 2 preview. I want it to be Civil War, and for it to have elements that meld nicely into those movies without being so heavy-handed about it. That's where the problem comes, the heavy-handedness of the storytelling lately in Marvel movies. It needs to flow in a more natural way for it to not seem like we're just watching constant previews for upcoming movies. And after seeing The Winter Soldier, I have all of the faith in the Russos to do so. They pulled off telling a great story in The Winter Soldier that had plot points that could be used as a catalyst for further plot points in future movies. And one more concern I have for this is, why are they calling it Captain America Civil War? If anything, Civil War is a team movie which centers around Iron Man and Captain America and their subsequent teams. Why not just call it Marvel's Civil War? I hope focusing too much on Captain America doesn't take away from the story. It would also be weird if they didn't focus enough on Captain America in a Captain America movie. So I kind of feel like they should have just made a Civil War movie and then a third Captain America movie. I wonder if this has to do with they're trying to close out certain characters' arcs so they can bring in the new order of characters. Because there's not going to be enough room. Eventually, it's going to get to the point with all of these characters to where you can't give everyone a movie except for every 5 years because there are too many characters to continue it in the way they are. It just seems strange that there are 2 titles on the docket for Marvel that have where the title of the film has nothing to do with the storyline that they're basing it on. Just like I was saying last week on, I think it was Friday's show about Thor Ragnarok, the storyline behind Thor Ragnarok is going to be the story of Planet Hulk, essentially, down to the point to where Thor is going to be playing the role of Beta Ray Bill from the comic book. But they're calling it Thor Ragnarok, and I think it's just to close out his storyline so they can make room for the new characters to come into the fold. So if they're doing that, I hope they're doing it gracefully and not just pushing people out. I guess we'll find out on May 6th when Civil War comes out, though. What are your thoughts on this? Do you have an opinion on Spider-Man or Civil War and how you'd like it to go? Do you think that the fact that the movie has been screened is an indication that we'll get a look at the new Spider-Man anytime soon? Do you have an opinion on any of this at all? Let me know by emailing me at jason@mainstreamgeek.com or finding me on Twitter or Facebook at mainstreamgeek. Let's see. According to Jeremy Irons, who will be playing Alfred in Batman v Superman, we'll be getting a whole new spin on Alfred. Apparently, they're going to be going for the Earth 1 route from the comics with the character, and he's going to have a background in Special Forces. Not only that, but from what he's saying, he's not going to be the butler this time around. He's going to be the person who raised Bruce after his parents' death, but doesn't even live at Wayne Manor. He has his own lake house, his own bachelor pad, if you will. Irons also added that he's going to be integral in the training that Bruce had that led him to becoming Batman. I haven't watched a lot of the show Gotham, but I think that this is supposed to be a loose version of Alfred from that show also. I've got to say, I think it's cool that Alfred's going to be the driving force that led Bruce to become Batman instead of just some old man that's along for the ride. It makes him seem like more of a character with something at stake in the story. I guess he always had something at stake because he cared about Bruce and if he was alive or dead. But letting Alfred play sort of a dual role where he's both the devil and the angel on Bruce's shoulder, that could be super interesting. Might really add something to the story. I have lots of beefs with what they're doing with Batman v Superman, but none of them are really coming from how they're changing up the Batman storyline from what I've heard so far. As long as these things are carried out well, to me, these things are a welcomed refresh to the story. So as long as all of this is true, these Snyder changes to the Batman film mythology seem like they're going to be a bit of fresh air. That's the thing about Zack Snyder. He's not a bad filmmaker. I remember seeing his first big movie, the remake for Dawn of the Dead, when it was in theaters, and that was done crazy well. It was dark, but it didn't really rely on a dark atmosphere to make it dark, like horror movies tend to do. Actually, the movie was super colorful. People tend to give Zack Snyder a hard time that his movies have a dull color tone, which he does, but not in that one. It was a really colorful movie. If you haven't seen the remake of Dawn of the Dead, you need to fix that right now. Go watch that movie. And it did a great job of having a main character that the story was about and sticking to that character, but fully developing what turned out to be a huge cast without taking away from the main point of the story. Actually, as I'm talking about his direction of Dawn of the Dead, it's kind of making me optimistic about how well he could potentially pull off the huge list of characters in Batman v Superman. And we know he can do comic book adaptations and do them well. Who doesn't love the 300? Not to mention he's already made a superhero ensemble movie with The Watchmen. Not everyone loves that movie, but the main complaint from The Watchmen seems to be that it was too long. And it was a long movie, I'll give you that, but it was a good movie that needed to be long. The Watchmen was a book that was going to be hard to pull off no matter how you did it. Damn, as I'm saying all of this, I can't believe talking about Dawn of the Dead and Watchmen led me to say this, but I think I may have just talked myself into being excited about Batman v Superman. What do you guys think about Alfred being a special ops agent? Do you agree that Zack Snyder's back catalog might prove that he has the right stuff to pull off the Batman v Superman and Justice League movies? I know it's kind of got me thinking. Let me know by reaching out on Twitter and Facebook at Mainstream Geek or by emailing me at jason@mainstreamgeek.com. That's all I've got for you this time around. Make sure you visit mainstreamgeek.com to see more news stories and find out more about the show. You can find all of my social links on there also. Find me on Twitter and Facebook at Mainstream Geek. email me at jason@mainstreamgeek.com. Make sure you're subscribed to the Mainstream Geek Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud. You can have the videos on YouTube of the show. But whichever one you use, please be sure you're leaving a rating and review of the show. That way it helps others find me. Look up my other podcast, Completely Straight, on iTunes and Stitcher. And I'll see you on Friday. Until then, keep it geeky.